Welcome back to the voice of the private sector. This is Brian Bushlach's Business Briefing, presented by Delta Airlines. You can't stop Seattle.
Okay, welcome back to the show. We've had so many calls the past few weeks regarding the Credit Junction. Want to go behind the scenes there? I was in New York a couple weeks ago and caught up with one of the key players at the Credit Junction, Sergio Rodriguera.
There's this transformation in banking. You're seeing it across the economy, right? E-commerce, what the old brick and mortar stores, those are not going away, but there is a shift to online, and you're seeing that in banking as well. On Capitol Hill, on both sides of Pennsylvania Avenue, you're seeing this dynamic, and some policymakers, decision makers in Washington, D.C. aren't as up to speed on it because, unfortunately, they don't get a chance to go to places like Portland and Seattle or Tulsa or Denver and talk to real business owners. And so what Michael and I are, we have the privilege of going around and doing events in various cities, trying to provide to be not only a trusted agent, to be a resource, but also help small business owners understand what is happening, this whole change and transformation. So we spend a lot of time talking to business owners and explaining what is happening in the economy. I get a lot of questions given my background on Capitol Hill at the Treasury Department, living in Washington, D.C. Why can't I get a loan from my lender that I used to get prior to the financial crisis? And clearly the world changed in 2008 and 2009. And you're seeing this dynamic that you whether you call it online lending or marketplace lending or fintech, what we're trying to do here at the Credit Junction is really educate small business owners on the various new resources that are out there. You may have been turned down from your small or community bank, but there are now a host of resources that 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago weren't out there. So I think Michael had talked to you earlier about he feels very positive about the change that's going on. And I do too, because there are so many more options out there that are available to small business owners, but there is some confusion. And what we're trying to do is cut through a lot of the white noise and really educate folks to let them know that there is a face behind the technology, and that's I think important. Unfortunately, you're not going to see that on the pages of the Wall Street Journal or in the halls of Capitol Hill or Congress.
Yeah, it's not you plug in your information and the robot spits out the the approval or whatever. There are people behind the scenes. I think that's what the biggest confusion is in this marketplace with marketplace lending is you're used to the retail experience. And I think that's where most of us, business owners, consumers in general, are used to. And we love Amazon. That's a Seattle company, but there's no human element there, right? You place the order, it ships out, you get it, and well, gosh, I don't think I want to even waste time returning this, right? But that's where that, I guess, comes from, because you're so used to the non-human element. But that can't happen and doesn't happen with this transaction. It just can't.
Right. No, you're seeing, I get a lot of questions about e-commerce, right? Because it is an exciting world. And obviously in Seattle, it employs a lot of people. But there is a network effect of e-commerce. So where you used to go to your local store, or you used to go to Walmart to buy everyday goods, now with a click of a button, you can do it online. And yes, that may have an impact on some of those folks that are working in those traditional brick and mortar stores, but it's actually creating a supply chain effect. So you now have distribution centers or fulfillment centers that now have to deliver those products. And ultimately, that's creating jobs. Can the business owner understand all that by, again, reading or going online? No. That's why we go and spend a lot of time explaining to individuals that, the world has changed. There's all these new resources, but that creates a lot of opportunity.
Sergio Rodriguera Jr. joining us here at Credit Junction in New York City. So I guess look into the crystal ball here. You've been at this for a while. You get to go behind the curtain and find out what's happening in D.C. we've come this far. What do you think we'll see happening in the next couple of years?
Unfortunately, in the aftermath of the financial crisis, right, what happened was Capitol Hill and decision makers in Washington, D.C. wanted to ensure that there was not another financial crisis. So unfortunately, what happens in Congress is increased regulations and compliance was the aftermath. And unfortunately, the pendulum swung, and some would argue a little too far to increased paperwork and regulations that have impacted small and community banks. And unfortunately, that has filtered or trickled to small business owners. And so your listeners are seeing it every day. Unfortunately, they used to be able to drive down maybe 5 minutes to their local bank. Maybe that guy's not that bank's no longer there. There's been a lot of consolidation and a lot of mergers going on at the local level. A scary data point is that prior to the financial crisis, you would probably have about 100 to 150 small banks, community banks, open every year. Since 2009, only 3 banks have opened in the United States. And what folks on Wall Street and Capitol Hill, what they'll forget is that has an impact on business owners, and that's created a dearth of capital in certain places, especially rural areas. So what the Credit Junction is trying to do is bridge that gap. And not just us, but other online or marketplace lenders, is really fill the void where community banks or other financial institutions have stepped out. Will they go away entirely? Never. No way. You still have to go to your community or small bank for an auto loan or a home mortgage, checking accounts. So the world is a little different, but it won't be entirely different than what it was the last 100 years. So there again, I always go back to opportunity. This has created a lot of new options and resources for business owners, and the Credit Junction is one piece of that.
Talk about your backstory, too, because I know you bring a very unique skill set to the table here at the Credit Junction.
Well, after graduating from school, I was a naval officer, so I got a chance to travel the world. That was an exciting part of my life for about 4 or 5 years. I was lucky to work at the Treasury Department as an advisor to the Undersecretary. He was making decisions on banking regulations, so I was in a world of translating banking regulations to bankers and banking associations. We were dealing with a lot of anti-money laundering and know your customer type of rules and guidance to banks after 9/11. That was one of the things that we were ensuring, was that the banks that there wasn't another 9/11 style attack, and that illicit finance and illicit funds were moved through our traditional financial systems. After a few years, I went up to Capitol Hill and spent time on the House Financial Services Committee as a professional staff member, working with members of Congress post Dodd-Frank. And I'm sure, as your small business owners know, Dodd-Frank has had a huge impact on banking and at the community and local level. Again, the pendulum sort of swung a little too far, and again, some will say in increased regulations. I left after a few years, was interested in being a small business owner, was helping a couple of startups raise capital. That was more on the equity side. So raising capital is something that, unfortunately, I'm pretty familiar with now. When I met Michael and his vision for what the Credit Junction would become, I was immediately taken with his idea, because I had spent those years behind the halls of Capitol Hill, unfortunately working with bankers and understanding that increased regulations have consequences. They do have an impact.
Well, great insight from Sergio Rodriguera at the Credit Junction. I was at their New York headquarters recently. If you'd like to learn more about their lending platform, visit thecreditjunction.com. Approvals in as little as 10 days and up to $5 million in funding. This is really key moving forward for small businesses, not only across this region, but around the country. When we come back, more Business Briefing will introduce you to the top business attorney in the region.